All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This is PT Pintcast. Before we get started, had ourselves a day. If you know anything about like disability advocacy in the United States, with my day job at Mount Sinai, we got to talk to Judy Heumann. If you saw Crip Camp on Netflix, which was produced by President Obama, Michelle Obama, I had a chance to talk to Judy Heumann. It's pretty legit right there. So I'm riding that high is what I'm telling you right now. We're going to keep going with that. So we're having a good day. Before we kick things off, do want to say thanks to our friends at MW Therapy. Was talking with a private practice owner just a few days ago, and they were like, yeah, I hate my EMR, but I can't do anything about it. And I'm like, why? They're like, switching is worse than sucking. Like, it sucks 5 days a week, twice on Sunday, but like switching's even worse. And I was talking to our friends that are now sponsors of a show at MW Therapy, and they're like, yeah, we've got this whole thing to make it nice and easy to switch. And my friend was like, oh, I would do that. And I'm like, well, then go. Now you have been properly sponsored, right? I'm like, I'm talking about you, not even on the podcast, but check them out, mwtherapy.com. Take a test drive, like test it out, and then know that switch over, which is usually the detractor of why you stay with something that sucks. You ever been in a bad relationship for a long time? Why? You're just like, I don't feel like finding someone new. I don't feel like swiping. That's why. Don't do that with your EMR. mwtherapy.com. Take a test drive. Switching over is easy. Also, our friends just did an episode with these guys and released it this week. CBDRXforyou.com. That's your CBD store. Listen to that episode, which is out now. We did it with Dr. Tony Ferrari. He's got a PhD or 7 in chemistry, and like the graph for going over my head in that episode, real steep. Like, he was over my head in like the first question. Not a good look for me, I guess, but we brought it back down. I kept just like dumb it down for me, and he did. He just wanted to relay the best information about CBD for physical therapists and physical therapist assistants. What do you need to know? So check that episode out and check them out online, CBDRXforyou.com. We're not talking about CBD or EMRs or EHRs, whatever you want to call them. We're talking about esports, lowercase. I made that mistake once before, and I'll never make it again. And you'll find out with who as we kick off the episode right damn now. Welcome to PT Pintcast. We say great physical therapy conversations on tap. Find us on the socials at PT Pintcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Got the new Facebook group on there as well. Subscribe to the podcast as well. Apple, every once in a while, love them and everything. I'm on a Mac. That's what we record on. But like every once in a while, I do something weird with their podcast platform where they'll do an update. It's like you got to take it a step forward, but it's really 2 steps back. They do stuff where all of a sudden you're subscribed to a bunch of stuff, but then you're actually not. So just make sure in the top right-hand corner, like, boop, boop, subscribe. This is my way of saying, hey, like and subscribe. During the live stream, as we do it on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, everything, questions or comments, let us know what those are. If you're watching live, drop live. If you're watching the replay, drop replay as well. Website is ptpintcast.com. And let's get into it. Just did an episode not long ago on esport. We're doing it again because I'm telling you, it's not going to be a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. Oh, I even have a special music bed for today. I was like, find me something video gamey, something that sounds like it was like 8-bit. That's as close as I got. So sue me. Today we're talking with physical therapists, esports specialists that work at 1HP, an organization that provides health and performance services to players, teams, and school esport programs. They recently released a JOSPT article titled "More Than a Game: Musculoskeletal Injuries and a Key Role for the Physical Therapist in Esports." Let's get them into the studio. Let's bring in Matthew Hu, Kevin Ho, and welcome back to the show for like the 17th time. Kate McGee is like probably one of the longest tenured people on the program. Gentlemen and lady, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, first question. We always get it out of the way early. The hardest thing is, what are we drinking? It's the first round. What do you guys have on tap?
Well, I've got an 11-mile long run tomorrow morning, so I'm just drinking tea.
It's okay. We don't discriminate here. Tea is fine.
Just water for me.
Water, hydrating.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I must have missed the memo. It's 12 p.m. here, and I'm having actually alcohol. And what's with these guys? It's nighttime for you guys.
Kevin's representing 1HP well today.
Very nice.
Very proud of you.
I got some Japanese choya, which is like a plum wine with a bit of soda water. Nice. So,
Well played. I will try that out. And so, all right, so Kevin, you're saying it's a different time zone. Where are you located? Then we'll start with
I'm
that.
in Sydney, Australia at the moment.
I've heard of it. All right, first round is brought to you by our friends from Owens Recovery Science. Find them online, owensrecoveryscience.com. Single source for PTs, OTs. I don't know who else wants to do this. Chiropractor, whoever's trying. BFR, blood flow restriction rehabilitation training. Find them online, owensrecoveryscience.com. They have the same thing, the evidence, the instruction, the certification, and the equipment you need to apply it properly in your clinical practice. Again, owensrecoveryscience.com. Well, cheers to you guys. I'm doing an old fashioned, not an entire pint of old fashioned. I just didn't have an old fashioned glass, so I was like, I'll make it in a pint glass. So cheers to you.
So
guys.
I've got a highball glass, which like I actually never use for highballs, mostly because my cat is a little priss and will not drink out of like those metal basins.
Oh.
So like she likes to drink out of cups, but if I give her like a regular sized cup, she knocks it over inevitably. I give her a highball glass full of water. She drinks it without knocking it over. It's perfect.
She's classy. She's like, listen, I'm
Very
classy.
classy.
I am classy. So mentioned in the intro, hey, we're not debating if esport is a thing or it's going to be a thing or soon it'll be a thing. And do you think it'll be a thing? You guys are in you guys had an article, right? I mean, JOSPT, that's pretty legit. So when you see that, like, hey, does this make you guys feel like esport meta, like we're arrived, like we're here? Hey, everybody, we're here. Like, how does that make you feel to see someone like JOSPT in our profession discussing the thing that you guys have been, kind of inspired by for so long?
It was kind of crazy because, like, all of us go through school, like, we're looking at JOSPT. It's like, that's where we go for half of our research articles. Anytime we're doing a journal club, we're checking JOSPT first. And so, like, to have something that they wanted to publish, that they then told us, like, hey, this is super interesting. If you have any future case studies, send them our way, was like just mind-bogglingly amazing. Especially because I think for all of us, when we started out, convincing people that physical therapy needed to be or already was a thing in esports was such an uphill battle. So to kind of get that a little bit of external validation that, this is a thing people are interested in and nobody knows anything about. And spoilers on the article. It's basically, we don't have enough research. Here is our paper establishing that we don't have enough research. You should fund research on this topic.
That's every article, though, right? I mean, you're a good researcher.
But this one is explicitly that.
This is explicit.
Oh, it is. It really is.
So same question to the gentleman on the show as well. Like when you're like, hey, we're gonna be published in this, and this is our topic, and this is our jam. This is not. We need to convince them. This is like, hey, we're gonna publish this. How'd that hit you?
Yeah, for me, like I published other papers. I did a research degree, which I published in sleep, in back pain, and osteoarthritis. But if you were to ask me in my research career, what my most proudest paper is, it is this one. Like, because you can tell we're so passionate about esports. It's in JOSPT. Sorry, I think I butchered the name, but yeah, I call it JOSPT all the time.
He does. It's great. He says musculoskeletal and he says JOSPT, and it's delightful.
We'll allow it. I tell my boss at Mount Sinai is Australian. One of my coworkers is Australian, and I'm like, it's like unfair. You guys like get an extra 15 IQ points as soon as you open your mouth. I sound like a dumb American.
Bonus for the accent.
So
you could butcher JOSPT and still sound way smarter than me. Like, it's just going to happen. Matthew, how to feel, man? Like this is the map, right? In PT.
Exactly. I mean, I think likewise to Kate and Kev is just such a great first step. And it's my first real published paper. So I was really happy about it. And just excited really where we can possibly take it, because we've spent so much time and put so much time into, working with this population, and to really finally see it in such a prestigious journal was just great to see.
Yeah. Legitimizing.
It's amazing. Yeah, really.
Yeah. Legitimizing. All right, so now we've patted you on the back for getting an article published in JOSPT about esports. Let's get into the nitty gritty. Like, what'd you publish? I mean, spoiler alert. Kate already gave a spoiler alert. We need more research, fund more research. But what'd you guys look at?
So this was an editorial. So this was not us, reviewing existing data, reviewing existing literature. Although that's also something we're doing in a separate study. But this one was specifically about, let's introduce other physical therapists to what esports is, why they should care about it, and what our fit potentially is. So exploring what our fit potentially is involved looking at what are the needs of this population right now, what are the things that, you know, people have treated so far. Anecdote, you know, because we don't have enough data to say anything other than this is anecdote right now, but we did. You know, and then looking at what's the research that we really need, because when we look at when people think about sports, traditional sports or esports, really everybody's thinking about like, how do I make my performance better? That's the thing that the players are always most interested in. And the thing is, where we're at in esports research right now is we're so far behind in terms of what research exists that we really can't be looking at, well, how much does caffeine boost performance and how much does jet lag affect performance right now? Because we haven't even really defined performance all that well. Right. What are we meaning by performance? You know, what is the prevalence and incidence of injuries? Are we able to establish with certainty that certain interventions reduce the risk of those injuries? And in order to do that, we need to establish prevalence and incidence first. In order to do that, we need demographic studies. And so there's so much that needs to be done, and we really put in a pretty big call to action at the end of this editorial of, look, this field exists, it's going to keep existing, and there's a very large amount of money in this industry, so people want this research. We need people to do it.
Follow the money on that. Kevin, if you were going to give someone, you know, the pint version of this, you know, following up with what Kate just said, what would you want people to know about this editorial?
Yeah, so people who make lots of money playing video games, it's their livelihood. They get injuries too. We kind of use some analogous populations such as office workers, but I usually think like graphics designers who use their mouse a lot, or musicians. Think of a violinist or a piano player. So physiotherapy or physical therapy, the Americans say, we already have people looking after this, and it only makes logical sense for us to be in esports. But we have our own normal ways of assessing people. We use our knowledge of being gamers ourselves to actually treat these people, but then that's just really coming from our experiences. If we had the data, if we had the research to really back it up, that would make it so much more powerful to go, this actually really, really works for many of the gamers out there.
Yeah, not just money too, right? We mentioned that, like, people make their livelihood. There's a lot of money. Like, we're using, like, you know, we're using words with like billions in terms of an industry, but also attention, right? So like, yeah, I pay attention to how, not to rehab from a hamstring injury. I am under no delusion that I'm going to be starting for the Packers because I heard their quarterback is out with some sort of virus. But I want to make sure that I can rehab just to be a weekend warrior. So you've got these professional players, right? They're the top half percentage. But you have a giant industry of people watching and following along to this. Matthew, what would you want people to know about this?
I mean, I think Kate and Kev covered it really well, of sort of the top down of what the approach is. But I mean, likewise, right? That this is a population that has its own needs, and we've seen things that have worked anecdotally. So we want more and more support in terms of researching some of the things that will establish the spaces of research and help all of the future professionals wanting to work with the population do better and really help the population better, because there's a huge gap in understanding how to work with this population at the moment. And we need to fill that gap or meet that gap, because I think a lot of gamers are falling, I guess, slipping through the cracks, essentially, and not really getting the treatment that they need because, hey, they just don't understand the lifestyle. They don't understand the physical demands that these gamers are dealing with.
And that's why 1HP exists, right? 1hp.org is the website. And I've seen, because you have your logos like avatars, which is very on brand, right? I feel like every time I go to your website or I go to social media pages, there's like, you have a larger team. Like, I feel like that should be evidence of like, this is a thing, because like, you're getting more and more esport medicine professionals to say, hey, like there's a market for this. There is an audience for this. There's a patient population for this. Is this going to be, I don't mean easy, right? But if I'm trying to track players on a football field or a swimming pool, collecting information is hard, like digital, but your athletes are connected to machines. Is that going to potentially make it easier in the future to at least get some information? Because now if you figure out a way to do it, right, like Xbox is known for kind of being a little bit open source in the back end in terms of adaptability. are you going to be able to start to like pull like big data sets? This is the thing that like people in research data, as Kevin said, because I think that's how they say it down under. Is this going to like kind of open the floodgates at one point? Because once you figure it out, boom, next thing you know, you get big numbers.
So yes and no.
Go ahead.
Like because yes, on the one hand, there's a lot of data that does exist. Right now, we don't necessarily have anything to correlate that data with. Like we have a whole bunch of like there's APIs. There's the kind of the internal game logging of tracking what keys a player hits and when and how often and in what order relative to each other. Those are absolutely things we have.
How long you're playing. Every time I log into Call of Duty, I'm depressed. It's like, here's how long you've spent on this stupid game, 9 weeks or whatever.
But that's data that's purely digital. That tells you what's happening in the digital space. We don't have any way right now of having that correlated to injury risk or pain that players are currently experiencing or their overall health status. And so we need to do the research to do that. And obviously having that data set available is going to be great. But there's two really big hurdles in my mind, and I'm sure Kev and Matt can think of others. And the two really big hurdles that I can think of are, one, for a lot of games and a lot of developers, that's proprietary data. And they are a little bit loath to release that sometimes. Now, when it comes to research, they're more likely to release it, especially if they want to support their esports scene. But that varies from developer to developer. And two, and probably the bigger hurdle, is if you came up in traditional sports, it's expected that there's going to be some data and some analytics and people kind of suggesting how you can be better and a body of research that your coaches are drawing on. That's kind of just a known quantity. That's how it works and how it goes. So you expect that. You expect that kind of input. That's not a known quantity in esports. That's not an expected part of development currently. Right now, if you get to the top, you did it on your own, most likely. Maybe you had some friends or some networks that you played in, but you didn't have, any analysts, any statisticians, any, research to inform your coaches on how they were going to train you, what your practice models were going to be. And so there is a little bit of resistance sometimes to being involved in collecting that data in the first place. And that's actually when we're involved in research projects, whether it's our own or somebody else's, honestly, one of the most valuable things that we offer is we work with enough players that we can probably convince at least some of them to participate in a research project of some sort.
I mean, it's culture change, right? I mean, you mentioned like, hey, this is expected. Like, when you were doing when everybody was doing it, you kind of just like, all right, this is what we do. We do this.
How it goes.
Yeah, so you've got to almost do culture change in terms of changing that. Other barriers, or what else did you want to say, Matthew? You were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I mean, she pretty much covered it, but I do think, that kind of data specifically, the mouse movement distributions, the distance traveled, the clicks, all of that can be really helpful if we correlate it to an objective measure like endurance or strength and time played. I'm sure that can be researched and created into some sort of injury prevention index or risk index. But I do think data also is a double-edged sword in that it can create narratives, right? And can create decision-making trees that maybe lead people down a path that is overprotective, or, hey, like, we have all this data and you really, really need to pay attention to this. That doesn't always take into the context of behavior, lifestyle, who they are as a person. And so I always think that, yes, that data is important, but how we utilize it is by far the most important, right? And a lot of the times, hey, with things like media, it can get really just so complicated and misunderstood, taken out of context.
Yeah. So let's talk. We sort of like preview this episode talking about myths. What are some myths about esport athletes that physical therapists, because that's our audience, right? Physical therapists should know, because I'm not an esport physical therapist, but if you have someone coming in your outpatient clinic with risk, and you need to know these things. So, Kate, I'm going to say you might want to go first.
All right, no. I'm going to propose something. All right, Matt, Kev, on the count of three, we're going to say the condition that everybody thinks gaming athletes have.
I think I know what this is.
All right, 1,
ready?
2, 3. Carpal tunnel.
Carpal tunnel.
None of them have carpal tunnel. All right, not quite none, but a very small percentage of them actually have carpal tunnel. So, like, that's such a pervasive narrative, right? Like, you think about, they use keyboards and mice, they're at risk of carpal tunnel, which makes sense for, office work populations. But what we've found, and this is anecdotal because, we've only got so much data to draw from right now. What we found is there are very, very few players who actually have carpal tunnel and a lot more who have tendinopathic conditions. So I guess the thing that I would really want physical therapists to consider when they've got a gaming competitor or even just a casual gamer coming into their clinic, don't go in with assumptions about what they have before you've assessed them. Sure, you might assume they've got something going on with their wrists or forearms, and sure, that's probably what they most likely have going on. But if you're going to limit yourself and start with the assumption that they've probably got carpal tunnel until I've ruled that out, you're really cutting yourself off from a whole breadth of what could be going on and really doing them a disservice.
A little confirmation bias there, I believe I heard as well.
Yeah.
All right. So what are some other myths? All right, we got carpal tunnel. I feel like mentioning house like it's not lupus. Okay.
It's never lupus. That is our lupus. We absolutely have a meme somewhere floating around of Matt's face with like houses like beard on saying it's never carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So what are some other myths or things? And I also want to like myths and stereotypes too, but also like good information. So let's just not bust the myth of the stereotype. Like also like let's give them the good information.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few, right? I think one being rest as a intervention for any and most injuries. That's a really maybe good place to start for us, because I think I just posted something today where, hey, if we know that the gamer that we're working with has some tendon pathology, rest is really not the answer, and that it might affect the structure of the tendon, it might affect kinetic chain strength, it might affect the local muscle strength, and it might even affect motor drive, right? So
also might just not listen to you, right? We talked about that before. It's like you're not understanding their culture.
Yeah, right. And so if you don't if they don't understand, I don't know if you guys can hear that.
I just started hearing that somebody.
My baby is my baby's having a good time as I'm on this podcast, but
you're just saying hi.
Yes,
she wants to make sure
she needs rest. She needs rest. But gaming injuries, maybe the rest is not the right initial intervention. So most of the time, it is something like load management that needs to be considered.
Exactly. So relative rest or optimal loading depends on who I'm talking to. If someone needs to rest a bit, I use relative rest. Someone who's actually not doing anything, we need an optimal load. It achieves the same purpose. I guess the other myth is like there's a perfect posture. There's a thing that we often say in 1HP is your best posture is your next posture. So you probably notice, some of us have, do you need a perfect gaming chair? I'm not using a gaming chair. Do you have to hold the mice in a perfect way? Which grip do you must use? Is it the palm, claw, fingertip? Is it nice if you have the keyboard more diagonal or not? All those things people get hung up on. But then when we think about the most common issue that we've been meeting, which is tendon issues, a lot of it just goes to what we said a few minutes earlier, where it's about how strong your tendons are and also what you're doing. And if there's a mismatch, we kind of just sort it out. Either make your tendon stronger, temporarily make it not be too much on your load. And then as you get better, we're back to where you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, Kate, in a previous episode, we talked about similarities, in terms of non-esports. What do we talk about? How do we call sports? Not sports and then esport? I don't know, but non-traditional sports. I don't know. They're not regular sports. But you're saying, by doing a video analysis or asking someone like, hey, videotape yourself, but don't start until like the 30-minute mark, right? Because that's when because when you're being recorded, of course, you're going to sit a certain way. But if you don't,
I've got a player I'm working with right now. What I had him do was I had him set up his phone like perpendicular to him so that he could give me like a side view, and I had him just record for like the entire 2 hours that he was playing, and then turn it into a time lapse so I could watch his posture over time. And like the players who tend to have more pain, again, anecdotal, are the ones who sit in the exact same posture and slowly like start to fall out of it as their back curves more and they lean forward and they get more forward head posture. And it's not much variation on the same posture. The folks who are telling me they don't have much back pain are the folks who are fidgety as all heck and probably annoyed their teachers like crazy in elementary school, because they're sitting in their chair and then they're sitting with like one leg crossed and then they got like both legs up for a bit. And then, they're, kind of perched on the edge of the chair and then they're leaning back in it. And like those constant changes of position are so much better than any one posture could ever be.
Right.
And also when we're kind of teaching that narrative, when we're teaching about, movement is more key than any one posture could ever be. It's a little bit less that players feel stressed about having or not having the perfect posture. it can absolutely be a thing that, kind of creates this self-perpetuating cycle of anxiety and pain, right? We know that there's a really close link between your psychological state and the physiological state. And so if you're stressing about how good your posture is or isn't, you're A, not focusing on your game, and B, that much more likely to be really hypersensitive to any sensation of discomfort. And so that creates this kind of internal narrative about, oh my God, I'm not doing it perfectly. I'm not doing it optimally. I'm going to injure myself. I'm at risk of injuring myself. And so really disrupting that narrative by encouraging movement above all else is really one of the things that we work on a lot at 1HP.
This is great when I love when people online and they say, like, smart people will say, like, don't speak in absolutes. Like, that's probably a smart person, right? Never or always. Like, and kids, if you're taking tests out there, never or always feels like a trap answer. Because if you can find one exception, then that's not true. But I love when they'll do, like, have you seen like the one where like people are doing a breakdown of like Usain Bolt and they're like, knee valgus stress is horrible. Like, well, it's like you lose so much energy if you valgus, and it's like, he's the fastest guy on the planet. Look at that thing. Exactly. And then you break it down. It's like, okay, so maybe like everything's individual, right? So
maybe like everything is relative, and most people's bodies adapt to the demands that are placed on them, so long as you build up those demands appropriately over time.
I was just exactly. I was just reading something, and I would love to give him credit. I think it was Lenny Macrina, and he was saying like, hey, I feel like the best athletes are the best compensators. Like, they're the ones who are like, hey, do you do it perfect all the time since you started? Probably not. So your first time trying to throw harder than you did yesterday, you probably compensated in some way, and you probably kept compensating. It's just turtles all the way down, and you're just the best compensator.
Functional compensation that doesn't injure you, great.
Right, exactly. Let's do that. Right, and then again, to Kevin's point, over time, like, is this compensation in terms of the load and the streak? Like, I mean, the cool part is we're now having conversations of, well, it's both ways because they're memes too, like in terms of like load management, especially in the the NBA, where it's a grueling schedule. I talked with the Nuggets, the Denver Nuggets PT, and he's like, that's a huge thing. We take crap for it. We get it because, like, hey, if you've got, Djokovic or whatever, like, if you're seeing a professional athlete and you bought a ticket and they're not playing that game and they're sitting out that tournament, or they pull out of a tournament, like tennis players have been doing in terms of load management, like, that sucks. It's like, yeah, but that's that guy or that girl's career, and they could be out for months or years or forever if they don't pay attention to that.
Right.
All right. So we're talking about current research in esports. What are the things that you're focused on coming down the line? You mentioned prevalence and incidence, and those are words that I remember. I passed research. I swear to God, I did. And I can pronounce those names. But what's the next step? What do you need to start to be doing it? And are you guys going to do it, or who the heck's going to do it?
I'm going to throw this one over to the professor.
Yeah. So the good news is that there have been some groups around the world that have kind of surveyed, like, even esport teams on where the pains are. And I mean, there are some things I wish they could also have added, but I'm so glad that it even exists. But the first step is to really have a look at, what is published, what isn't. So we're doing something called a scoping review. It's kind of like a review where normally we call it a systematic review, when you get all these studies that are similar and you crunch the numbers and see what it all says as a whole. Unfortunately, in esports, as we said earlier, there's not that many of those. So there's not that many numbers to put together. There's only a bit of paper going, this guy was playing Nintendo Wii and that hit issues. This guy was playing Call of Duty and had issues. This guy had VR and fell over. So I mean, that's still good information, but we can't put them all together that easily and as a number. So we're doing a type of research to kind of just put it all in one space, and then we can then go to the next step and go, well, we don't have data on this place. We knew that already, but we now really, really know we don't have data in this space and that space. And then maybe some of it we'll do as a team, but we also want to encourage the greater world of physios and other researchers to help us on this, because there's a lot of work to be done.
And a side note, I'm real annoyed at least two of the studies that we found in our scoping review so far, including one that was the longitudinal assessment of imaging and disability and back pain, aka the laid back study. And also all of the orthopedists who thought they were absolutely original by titling their paper Musculoskeletal Medicine when they were talking about the Nintendo Wii. I was real mad about that.
Well, though, I'm gonna give Australian researchers a lot more credit. We did a couple episodes with what is evidence in your inbox, Pedro. So physiotherapist evidence database, evidence in your inbox. And like they did like a review of like their top 10 most downloaded papers. And they were all like acronyms that were so memorable, like lip smack and like all these different. I have no idea what the hell the thing was about, but I do remember lip smack because I was like, how did you get this acronym? But yeah, I guess
cardiologists are far worse for that. Like if you ever want to read like really, really terrible acronyms that are like, you're going to just get mad at how bad the pun is, read some cardiology research papers.
Well, all right. So I'm working with one of my colleagues at Mount Sinai, and he's a cardiovascular pulmonary physical therapist from down under, and he's developed a PEP device, positive expiratory, is how he says it. A PEP device, positive expiratory pressure. Yep. So you blow through this. I call it a kazoo. It looks like a kazoo, but it helps to, he's got all the research behind it. And I'm like, dude, we need a name. You can't call it the positive expiratory pressure device. It needs something like call it Peppy or the PEP or like something. And he's like, nah, man, like I'm telling you, as the marketing guy who had a background in it, you got to give it something. You can't call it the positive expiratory pressure device.
I thought you were going to call it the ocarina or something. Being given emphasis about esports.
Ocarina, yeah. Marketing.
I thought you were going to call it the ocarina
for gamers.
For those who don't know, Zelda. You'll Google it.
That's
you know what we're talking
flute,
about.
right? The flute.
Yes,
Basically.
Exactly.
Ultimately, if you come up with an acronym that somehow managed to work for kazoo, that would also be memorable.
Right? Yes. It doesn't make any, a sound, but
you could change that.
We could change that. How hard is it? How hard is that?
Feature. Not a bug.
We've got some cool questions to come from the background in just a minute. I do want to say thanks to one of our sponsors, and I want to ask this question to all three of you. Okay, what is something that people are surprised to learn about you? Kate, we'll have you go first. We'll go around the horn.
What are people surprised to learn at me? That I'm conversationally fluent in Spanish, and that I'm frequently asked if I'm from the Dominican Republic when I speak in Spanish.
Wow, can you say something in Spanish? I would have no idea what it is, so just have at it.
¿Qué quiere hablar?
I want to say something longer so I can hear the accent. Like, give me some flavor here.
Me llamo Kate, soy una terapia física. Soy de terapia física. Estoy de Nueva Jersey. Yo vivo en Washington, D.C.
That sounds legitimate to me, so I'm going to give you that. So
I drop my S's. It's what makes me sound apparently Dominican.
I like it. Kevin, something that people are surprised about when they learn about you.
Yeah, I mean, most people meet me as like that professor or that lecturer at uni, and I don't have this background. I have like an office background, and then I go, bang, this is actually what I love doing, and I'm actually on Twitch as well, by the way. And then you can see like the people who play games, their eyes just went. But yeah, that's something that I love to throw at people, and obviously it ties into what I'm passionate here. Yeah, the other thing is that sometimes they're just surprised I'm married.
She exists. All right. Better.
Matthew, surprising. What do people are surprised to find out about you?
Probably that I used to teach hip hop dance.
Yes.
Yes, and I still dance, guys. So you might find some YouTube videos of me dancing, maybe some TikToks. But yeah, that's pretty surprising to some people.
I'm actually getting word from our studio. I'm touching my ear here, but that we actually have the YouTube channel. I'm just kidding. I wish we did, though. If we had that, that'd be fantastic. All right, so we are doing this segment called Surprising. PTs are usually surprised to learn that physical therapy and balance centers was created by PTs, especially for PTs in private practice. And a surprising stat, private practice owners who join the physical network, they grow more than 40% and retain 100% of their autonomy as well. Check them out online, physicalfranchise.com. That's physicalfranchise.com, FYZICAL. We've got an upcoming episode with those guys very, very soon. All right. So I wanted to let's bring in producer Juliet. Let's bring in producer Teo. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your show, guys.
Hi, guys. Hi.
Teo, you're a PT student in upstate New York at Ithaca College. It's gorgeous up there. There's a pun that people don't start using. So something happened recently, like last week, that esports was involved, and I wanted to make sure people know it's everywhere. What happened?
Yeah, no. So in my class, clinical administration, last Thursday, we get into our separate groups, and then our professor kind of just goes around the class every once in a while. You might ask a question, but last week he came over and he's kind of like, I'm interested in learning more about esport, but the question that people have been asking is, are people in esport, are they considered athletes? And then he kind of just wheeled away. And then it just sparked like a big discussion. And so people were, going back and forth. My group was pretty going at it, really. So it was an interesting conversation to have in class.
So what was one or two of the arguments, like pro or con? I'm sure the 1HP crew has heard some of these before, but I'm interested.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, so I immediately told him yes, and then my friend next to me was like, no, and I was like, well, I mean, why don't we look up the definition of a sport? So I mean, really a competitive activity, requiring a skill and physical activity. I was like, I think that kind of aligns with what is going on with esport. And they're like, well, no, that's not true. So people on the other side, well, there's chess. So if you're saying that's an athlete, then it was pretty interesting.
This is Keith Olbermann from ESPN a few years ago, Kate, when we talked about just being the old white guy in the room going, I said no, so it's no. And you're like, yeah, but I'm just going to, I'm not
Bless your heart, we're going to ignore you and keep making progress. That's fine.
The thing for my parents' generation is I'm going to convince you otherwise. I think now my generation is like, that's cool, man. I'm just going to disagree with you. And I'm going to go over here. I don't care what you have to say.
Yep, you can feel that way. I'm going to go do things with it successfully.
I heard a great line, and I love to share the advice. This is not my own. I'm regurgitating, but it's a great mindset and thing to say to someone when you can tell that they want to get into beef with you. This is online on a keyboard or in person or whatever. And the line was, I'm not here to have the argument that you're here to have. So have a great day. And it was like, you've just called them out for what they are, which is you clearly want to have an argument. I'm just not here for that. So good luck finding someone else who's going to have that argument.
I mean, it's kind of like the parable of the gift of anger, right? There's a Buddha who's going about the villages, talking to people about, kind of their philosophy and their belief system. And one of the fathers of one of the youths who's been listening to him comes storming over angrily and is yelling at him about how he's corrupting the youth and, taking their time away when they should be working. And the Buddha kind of sits there calmly and just listens to him and smiles and then goes to walk away. And the man is so angry about this. He's like, why aren't you angry with me? Why aren't you trying to convince me otherwise? Buddha tells him, well, if someone came to you with a gift and it was a gift you did not want, what would you do with it? And he's like, well, I just let them keep the gift. And the Buddha says, and so it is with your anger. I return the gift of your anger to you. It's the exact same way with a lot of folks who are making some of the arguments that we've heard about, whether or not esports is a sport, whether or not these guys are athletes. We don't need to have that debate. That's a red herring. I'm not here to have that debate with you. I'm here to figure out what's the best way to take care of the esports competitors we have. About the only time that I actually care about the argument of whether or not they're athletes and whether or not it's a sport is, are we trying to define things for the purposes of the IOC, the NCAA, or various federal policies? Otherwise, I do not care what you want to define them as, so long as you want to give them the best care possible for what it is they're doing.
I like it. You can tell Kate is fired up, and that's what I'm here for.
Look, this is the result of all the arguments that I don't have with people.
and you've called it out for what it is, and now you know exactly what to do with that gift. Juliet, you had a great question to ask, and I wanted to make sure you had a chance to ask it with this crew.
Yeah. So I'm only a year out, so I graduated just about a year ago, but with my curriculum, we didn't talk about esports. We didn't talk about esport medicine. I would say probably robotics we talked about and neurological conditions with robotics, but esport athletes, I would say talking to you guys is the first time I'm hearing about esport athletes, the first time that you guys came on when I was working. And I was just thinking, okay, so if this is a direction we're going with, physical therapy and adding esports or having more of esports in, where would it be put into a PT curriculum? I have ideas, but I just wanted to hear what you guys were thinking.
Kev, what do you think?
I actually had this conversation with one of my head professors almost about a year ago when I was so fired up on going, this is what I've been doing. This is the first time he heard about it. Basically, it kind of obviously fits somewhere between the musculoskeletal content and the sports content. And I think the easiest way to kind of introduce it was, we talk about sports management as in this is an advanced course. They already learned how to assess the body. But then when you're talking about a return to activity, in this case sport, then you really want to know if it's a tennis player, how do they train? What are their tournaments like? If it's a rugby player, it's same question, but it's going to be different. So then you can just extrapolate it to esports. If they play League of Legends, do they play in splits? Do they play many games in a row? Do they have breaks in between their games? If you compare it with CS, that's a different structure as well. So I think it can fit well in there. The other way it can fit in is we think about musculoskeletal in general, because a lot of the stuff that we are hoping to learn from esports is going to be helpful for our office populations. Just like how with the stuff we research in professional soccer players, we apply to runners and people just like to play soccer. So hopefully we get answers there, but it would fit well in the curriculum in just what lots of people are doing now. They're just sitting at the desk. They also use something called a keyboard, something called a mouse, and we can learn from the people who use it a lot more than the average person.
So then another thing that I was actually thinking, so sometimes when you think of an ACL injury, because you were saying that the main condition is tendinopathy in some way. So like when you have an ACL injury, you think of, okay, that's a sport athlete, something non-contact sport. So would you think that it's maybe easier to learn the condition and then see that type of condition, how it would relate to esports, or learn esport athlete and then break it down into different components of different conditions and treatment and things of that sort?
I think a way that would work really well is when you're going over various, musculoskeletal content, when you're talking about different injuries you might see in different body regions. I think it's really great to give real life examples of people who have those injuries and how they got them. And then I think separately, something that could work really well is, at least at UD, one of the things we had was an additional course you could take. It was basically a specialized sports course. And it was mostly about like learning each sport a little bit more and then learning about taping techniques and, just like kind of some of the extra bonus stuff you might want to do if you're going specifically into sports ortho. So I could absolutely see having like an add-on class that's basically an advanced technique, except it's an esports technique class. So, you've already gotten the basics of, this extensor tendinopathy or lateral epicondylopathy is, stuff you might see in office workers and esport competitors. And here's a case study that involves, someone from this population. But then separately, you could have this more advanced course where you do get to delve in a bit more. So, the folks who aren't going that esports route still get some exposure to you, because they're inevitably going to see gamers in their clinics more likely than not. But the folks who do want to go into esports have the opportunity to delve a little bit deeper and feel a little more prepared.
Yeah, I think it's not just for esports. This is the conversation we're having in universities where, the course content is important. If you don't know the anatomy, you don't know how to do active range of motion, you're not going to be able to treat a patient. You got to learn that first. But it's good to throw in some examples, some case studies while you have a context on how you approach it. And then later on, you get a specific, more extended case study on, a musician or an esports person or a rugby player. And then, you can say I'm listed all of them in different types of examples in the same package, as in we probably should have equal amounts later on all these different types of populations we might see as clinicians.
Follow-up question. If special interest groups is a way to break down different areas of PT practice within the American Physical Therapy Association, if esport was going to be a special interest group, a SIG, where would you position that? In what section or academy?
I feel like the easiest, path of least resistance way to go is probably get it under the sports special interest group, because it's got sport in the name, so everybody's like, let me immediately associate it with sports. At the same time, there's absolutely going to be pushback there, but we can't put it under neuro. We can't put it under acute care. It's its own thing, but I don't think it's established enough as its own thing to create an entirely independent special interest group. I think the best way to go about it would be get it underneath another header as kind of a subdivision of a special interest group. And the best subdivision, I guess, would be sports. Yeah.
And plus you just got published in JOS. PTS.
There's our argument.
Juliet and Teo, thanks so much for coming and asking those questions. Those were great. Wanted to give you guys an opportunity. All right, we do a thing on the show called 3 Questions. Let's do that now. Less unknown, more transparency. As a PT, you've got a unique set of skills: fine touch, in-depth medical knowledge, your communication skills. You can make a big difference on your patients' recoveries and long-term care. Move forward in your career wherever you want to go. Maybe you want to try it out in a different geographic location. Maybe you want to try it out in a different setting. not just outpatient ortho. So find out where you want to go. Let your PT or PT license take you where you want to go right now with the people from FusionMedStaff.com. That is FusionMedStaff.com, leaders in hashtag travel physical therapy. So let's go around the horn. 3 questions. We always start with a where question. Where's somewhere you can't wait to go? Now that it gets like, I don't know, 4:15 in the afternoon, I feel like we're already in the dead of winter, even though it's not terribly cold in the Northeast yet. But Kate, then we'll go to Kevin, then Matt. Where's your where? Where's somewhere you can't wait to go?
So I know I said the Ireland trip that I've been waiting for last time. I would also very much like to get a marathon on all 7 continents.
Wow, bold. I like it. Kevin, you're in the land down under, but where's somewhere you can't wait to get to?
Yeah, Japan. My wife and I were thinking, for our honeymoon to go there. And one, it was going to be too cold in the month that our honeymoon was going to be. And then so we'll go to the other place, which was Bali, then go to Japan. And then things happen. So we're still waiting once the borders open to fly to Japan.
There you go.
I like how Kevin like breaks it down like things happen. Like that things started happening. Like that's how we talk about like the last 2 to 3 years.
Gestures vaguely at everything.
And stuff happened, and then I haven't done enough. I haven't left my living room. Matthew, where's somewhere you can't wait to go? You got to bring the baby too. The baby needs a nap. Where are you gonna
right. So, I mean, I would love the baby to experience Italy, right? My wife and I are big foodies, but she would have to watch us eat all the great carbs, all the bread, all the pasta. I would love to go there, once things are ready for us, I guess.
Better.
And once she's ready.
There you go.
Yeah. Second question is a what question. What's something you've recently watched or read or listened to, a book, a movie, podcast, something that you think the audience just should experience?
I can go first.
Yeah, go first. I'm stalling.
I listened to a Pain Revolution podcast episode. And so it was a Lorimer Mosley education seminar. And I just think everyone needs to learn about pain science so that they can better understand how to work with all their patients, because pain is interesting and pain is complex, and pain, you need to understand more pain so that you can be careful with how you speak and work with your patients.
Yeah, your words matter. What do you think? Kate or Kevin, who wants to go next? What's your what?
I got one. There was a research paper I read recently that was really cool. It was a research paper on chess players. Chess players' eye movements reveal rapid recognition of complex visual patterns, evidence from a chess-related visual search task, which I found particularly interesting because it showed, something really cool about pattern mapping and how we track things visually. But it also had some really great implications for studies that we can do in esports as well, especially looking at how players deal with really complex fight scenarios, or even stuff like, CSGO, where you're, very quickly trying to localize somebody on the screen, detecting movement really quickly, detecting certain patterns really quickly. Yeah. So it'd be really cool to look at how gamers' brains do that stuff.
How does your brain work? I think it was talked about after that Queen's Gambit run on Netflix in terms of chunking, on how they don't actually look at the whole board. They look at it in quarters or fifths or eighths. So they chunk the information, because keeping all that information separate it would be, there's millions of variations, but they chunk those things together. It's just a smart way. Wow, our brain does that without us actually knowing that we do that to make us smart.
Yeah, and usually those chunks of chess pieces are on the top ceiling moving around.
You exactly. About chess shadow pieces. I do that as well after watching.
The other thing too is we thought originally, when we created chess playing computer programs, the way that we designed them originally was that they memorized every single move it was possible to make. And so in order to make the optimal move, it would take quite some time because it was mapping out all possible moves and choosing the best. But we realized, based on how the human brain works, that's not the most efficient way to make an optimal program.
Right.
It's instead all about pattern recognition, not consider every single possibility, because every single possibility is overwhelming.
All right. Kevin, what's your what? What's something you've watched, read, or listened to?
Yeah, I was like, you guys are so nerdy. I'm like, I was going to say Squid Game. Squid Game was amazing.
Oh, yes.
It told me so much about the mental game. It told me a bit about the socioeconomic stuff in terms of what can drive people to do things, and why they're playing this stupid game. well, if you put yourself in those shoes, they don't really have a choice for reasons.
Kevin, I need you to look at me, man. Squid Game player, they're athletes, okay? And they should be treated as such. They're playing a game, they are athletes. All right.
That's right.
Brought to you by our friends.
No spoilers, but they definitely were athletes.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Hey, I haven't watched it. FusionMedStaff.com. Find them online, FusionMedStaff.com. Last thing we do on the show is the parting shot. All right. Party Shot brought to you by our friends at the Academy of Orthopedic Physical Therapy. Current Concepts number 5. It's got to stay current. So they have to keep updating it. Current Concepts number 5, your perfect roadmap from wherever you are to wherever you want to go in your orthopedic career, wherever that is, wherever you want to go. Current Concepts Volume 5 or Episode 5 or Edition 5, whatever we're at now, is the perfect roadmap. Also, great resource if you're thinking about taking that OCS exam as well. So find them online, orthopt.org. Again, that's orthopt.org. All right, Parting Shot, your last chance for a mic drop moment, whatever you'd want to leave with the audience. Kate, do you want to go first or last? Since you've been on the show you've had so many parting shots. Do you want to go first?
Last.
All right, so Kevin, what do you got for us with your parting shot? Whatever you want to leave with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, you can easily find me on my socials. You can find me through the 1HP team. There's also www.drkevho.com. You can see all those shenanigans I also do, like the Twitch stream I mentioned. Happy to chat with people as well. Yeah, that's all I got. It's plenty.
Perfect. Matthew, what do you want to leave? What's your soapbox? What do you want to? What's the statement you want to make?
Let me think. Maybe just a reminder that it's not carpal tunnel syndrome for anyone working with gamers.
It's not
just
lupus.
A quick reminder.
All right, Kate, what do you got for your parting shot today?
So I've been thinking a lot recently about kind of the last year, gestures vaguely at everything, as Kevin mentioned, and how so many of us have really been dealing with a lot of burnout and overwhelm, especially as PTs, especially as kind of frontline healthcare workers. And I think one of the things that's really important, whether you're in esports, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're a gamer, whether you're anywhere else career-wise, is that self-care isn't just about building escapes from your life. Self-care is building the kind of life you don't feel like you need to escape from, that it's got enough balance that you feel comfortable being in it and being out of it.
Yeah, it was good that you went last because yours was really good and prophetic and everything like that. So want to say thanks for coming on the show. We've got the link to the JOSPT editorial in the show notes of this episode. If you're downloading on your social platforms, make sure to subscribe to the program. And I think at this point we'll just dance it out here for the rest of the program. You guys are watching the live stream.
The front guys.
You got to give us some
Yes.
time. We'll eventually make sure we get the hip hop. If you're listening on the podcast, you've got to go to the stream to be able to really, really digest the dance moves that we're watching.
Yes,
Matthew.
exactly. Break down the biomechanics, All
right. We said the best conversations happen at happy hour. Thanks to coming to ours.